On the bench today, we got two boutique amps. We've got a Morgan SW22R, and then we've got a Dr. Johnson, made in Australia, Ace of Clubs Reverb. So these amps are both, about 18, 20 watts, something like that, with two 6V6s power stage. This one's got a valve rectifier, the Dr. Johnson, and the Morgan here is solid state rectified. So look, I just wanted to make this quick video just to sort of show my experience with boutique sort of stuff and some of the pitfalls you get with it, and also just the fact that despite what you pay for them, what you get can vary wildly between manufacturers, big and small. Some of the small guys make really good stuff, some of the bigger ones not so much, and vice versa. It's a really an individualistic thing. It's the price should be less of a deciding point when you purchase something personally. So firstly, obviously, does it sound good? But then, I quite strongly recommend, if you're interested in buying boutique stuff, just to have a competent technician let their opinions weigh in on your decision of purchasing. Just a bit, Yeah, so there's some things with these amps that are good and some that are not so good. I try not to be too ranty or attacky. My goal is just to point out stuff that I've seen, because it's my job. All right, let's just start with this Morgan here. So the first thing with this, let's just start with some cosmetics first. All right. So look, this cabinet is really good, really well made. There's a little nick there, but this one's a couple of years old. Built nicely. It looks really tidy, good, very professional. Got a nice speaker in there. It's a Celestion G12H, 12-inch. We've got some good connections there to the speaker terminals, soldered and hardwired. Got a decent plug there. That's pretty, nothing amiss there. That's all really good. And then I can't be bothered flipping the amp over right now. I'm about to start working on it, but we've got mercury magnetics transformers throughout. We've got some gold plated RCAs there for the reverb tank. All right, let's just get into the chassis now. And so the first thing that is a bit of a concern here is the mains wiring. So it's not wired up to code or compliance standards. So as it stands here, we've got, sorry, I can never remember left or right for live or neutral, especially when we're looking at it from this angle. But let's just say that's live, because I'm pretty sure it is. And so this live just goes straight up to the switch, and then the switch goes straight to the transformer, primary winding. Then the primary winding out is this white wire here, and then that goes to the fuse and then to the neutral. Okay, so that's not how you want to do it. Here, I've just quickly scribbled this on a memo pad before I started filming. So this is how you wire up your mains if you want it to be compliant, or at least as safe as possible if not compliant. So if you've only got a single pole switch, your live wants to go to the tip of the fuse. That way, so if you pull the fuse out and you've forgotten to unplug it, you're very unlikely to get a shock there. And then you want the output of the fuse, or the ring side, to go to the switch. Then you want the output of the switch to go to the transformer winding. And then from there, if you've got a double pole switch, you can switch the neutral, or you can just hardwire that to there. And then our ground wants to connect to chassis on a dedicated point that's not shared by anything else. As you can see, they haven't done that here. We've just got a common ground point for at least two different windings of the secondary, and then our mains ground is this whatever reason, very small wire. That's possibly 20 or 18 gauge. I think it's Teflon, so it's probably like 20 or 18 gauge wire. Just looks really flimsy, but the only real issue here is that it's it's on a shared point. So it'd be better to just run that individually. We've got a couple of points here we could possibly use. Just use a, like an internal toothed tab. So here's a couple. I usually keep a whole bunch of them in stock. I think they're number 8 in freedom units. But number 6 is generally what I keep in stock. Number 6, that's 4 mil, something like that. So M3 or M4, generally good size. Outside of that, we've got, moving on to the power supply here, we've got some pretty sort of cheap generic capacitors as our main filtering for our power supply, and then we've got some, that's an F&T 100 mic 100 volt cap in our bias, fixed bias supply. And there's our adjustment pot there, and going throughout we've got some what look like Yageo 1 watt carbon film resistors, and we've got some Mallory M150 style capacitors. So that's all pretty good stuff. We've got a couple of silver mica caps there, which I don't recommend using. These ones are generally better quality, but most other brands you get focus. Most other manufacturers out there will fail prematurely. These ones are generally okay, but I'd rather just use a 1 kilovolt ceramic cap. Vishay stuff's generally pretty good. So look, yeah, it's generally built with good quality parts. Some of this it appears to be lead-free solder. Some of these joints are a little bit iffy, especially here. It looks like we're a bit solder starved there. So that could be a cause of concern. And then going on to, while I'm looking at these two. So look, this one's solid state rectified, and we're running 2 6v6s. So generally you'd see about 400 volts on your B+, maybe even as high as like 415 ideally, but we don't have much voltage drop off our primary secondaries for the HT. So we've actually got closer to 430 volts on this one as our loaded B+. Issue with that being, like I said, these are just generic sort of capacitors, which you know, for the price point of this amp, I would have expected to see some slightly better quality components in here just for these. But we've only got 450 volt rated caps in here, and our B+ is about 430, as I said. So there's not much margin on these. That one appears to be starting to bulge. This amp's only a few years old too, like maybe 5 years old or something. So we're going to replace them with some 500 volts, 105 degree rated, if you can trust that. We'll just use these Tube Amp Doctor Gold variants. They're supposedly pretty good. I've used hundreds of them over the last few years and haven't had any premature failures yet that I'm aware of, but you know. And then, so the reason this one actually came in was it just blew up a couple of blew up its power tubes, power valves, and cooked the screen grid resistors. That's a very common point of failure, is failure on the screen grid nodes over dissipating or something like that. So generally, if you're another tech in Melbourne and you see my work and you think I'm a weirdo for putting different value screen grid resistors in there from our old tried and true values of, like, you know, 470 ohm for Fender stuff and 1K for Marshall stuff, it's there's actually some, you know, technical merit behind it. So it's not just they did it that way, so we should. It's we're actually trying to limit the current to the screen grids that they can dissipate. Look, So I just, by standard, the minimum, absolute minimum I'll put in is about 1.5K, and then going up to 2.2K, 3 watt on smaller stuff, smaller valves, and then up to 5, use 5 watt resistors on EL34s and stuff like that, similar things to them. Basically just reducing the overall dissipation of the screen grid. It doesn't make much difference to the voltage, you know, there's only a few milliamps of current there, so it's not a huge voltage drop or anything, but basically it just helps reduce or limit the amount of current that they can draw, and, you know, give you a bit more life on your output tubes. I've done this to at least 100 amplifiers, I reckon, and I can't hear any detrimental effects, to be honest. No one's ever complained to me that their amp sounds different after I've done it. But, you know, it will help the valves last longer, especially in this day and age. They're just getting, the quality of stuff, as we all know, is just dropping dramatically. So that's why I do that, and I would strongly recommend anyone else there working on amps to upgrade them to different, higher values if you want to get a bit more life out of your valves. Going on here, what do we got? We got about, there's not much else to really talk about on this one. Everything else is pretty, you know, pretty decent. We've got good quality wiring and parts. There's just, like I said, just some dodgy solder joints. Just those filter caps are a little bit inadequate for my liking, and our mains wiring is bad, which is probably a really bad no for that one. Pretty sweet. All right, let's have a look at the Dr. Johnson. This one's built in Australia. I've not seen one of these in person before, but I've heard about them and I've heard good things. So this one came in because we were getting some intermittent sound cutting out, or right. The first thing I noticed when I opened this one up was heater balance resistors. I've actually replaced these with some half watt fusible ones. The first thing I noticed was the pilot light was flickering on and off, and a quick wiggle in the original resistors that were in there. One of the leads broke off just from metal fatigue. So I've replaced those, and I've already sort of load tested this one for about an hour or something, and I haven't noticed the signal dropping off or losing power or anything like that. After replacing that, I have noticed that there is still some intermittent flickering with the pilot light. I've tried cleaning the contacts, the globe, the bulb I should say, and yeah, it appears to be losing a bit of connection between those wafers to there. It only seems to be affected when I'm wiggling them. So look, they're only about 10-15 bucks, so I've just got a new one to replace that with. Focus, brand new. On top of that, we've got some pretty microphonic 6V6s in there, so quoted and been approved to replace those. This came with one of those little frangers for the sitting on one of them like that. Once again, I'm not a fan of these. If your valve's rattling, I prefer to just replace it if possible. If it's causing issues, that's only going to be a temporary fix. And you know, because you've got this pressure on there, and you've got, you know, in one spot, and you've got heat transfer and heat thermal cycling and stuff, it's possible if you've got enough pressure on one of those, it might crack the glass as well. Pretty rare, but can happen. The rectifier's out at the moment because I was just testing that. That's JJ GZ34 AR fucking whatever. And then so this one's just another Fender black panel style circuit. We've got a long tail phase inverter. We've got some slightly different tube lineups. We've got a 12AY7, then we've got a 12AU7 for our reverb driver, and then we've got 12AX7 for our reverb recovery, and then we've got a 12AT7, like I said, long tail pair phase inverter. Very cool. I haven't really heard these, and I'm not going to do a sound demo on them because I don't even have a decent mic to record them with, so if you want to hear them, just check out his website. Same with the Morgan. Just you know, and there's probably other guys out there who've done sound samples. I'm just focusing on how they're built for the most part here. That's the idea. Anyway, so our mains wiring on this one is good. So don't see that enough on boutique stuff. So this one's wired up correctly. As far as I know, I'm the first person to be in here to see inside this since it was made as well. So we've got our my little rough diagram. We've got our live going to the fuse tip. Verified that, and then coming out to the switch to the transformer. Out of the transformer, we've got a splice there between the neutral and the bottom end of the primary of the transformer, and we've got our ground, just nice bit of slack there. Sorry, terrible camera work. And then yeah, we've got a dedicated ground spot to that, so that's pretty good. And we've got a nylock on there. I might I'm pretty OCD. I'll probably add a flat washer and a spring washer to that, just for a bit of extra insurance of that ever coming loose. And then once again, looking over this, we've got again, sorry, my chubby fingers always getting in the way of the lens. We've got 450 volt rated caps here in our filter circuit, but this one's B plus is lower. It's closer to 400 volts, maybe 4 or 5 volts, something like that. So we've still got a more than 10% margin there, so it's fine. This one will be okay as is. Don't need to change them. We've got pretty good soldering on this, much better than the Morgan. We've got good quality parts. Looks like we've got some. It looks like we've got some Yageo again, 1/2 watt carbon films in there, and then we've got some metal film resistors. That might be a metal oxide actually. That one there in our phase inverter. That's all right. And then we've got, I've seen these, I think they're Vishay, these electrolytics here. I've not used them, not really familiar with them, but I'm sure they're better than some of the cheap stuff that you can get. So like I said, good soldering, good quality parts throughout. We've got a Sprague there as our reverb driver bypass cap. That's you know, Sprague stuff's not really what it used to be, but it's probably fine. This amp's only a couple of years old, but we'll test it anyway. Then we've got some silver micas there. I've quoted and talked to the owner about just replacing those with some ceramics. It was cool to go ahead with that, just as a bit of preventive maintenance, so it doesn't they don't start leaking and causing high amounts of DC voltage on your pots and heaps of noise and oscillations and other bullshit. So yeah, this one's, I personally think these are pretty good. I haven't had a chance to play it or hear what it sounds like, but it looks like, you know, it looks like a pretty good solid circuit. I'd recommend checking them out. They're well built, good parts. This isn't a promotion either. I'm just talking about my experience and my offhand opinion. But look, my only real gripe with this so far is just that grounding tab. So we've got our power supply ground there. It's sitting on the transformer mounting hardware. I'd prefer to see that on its own dedicated lug, just as the transformers can come loose over time because they're heavy, they get vibrated. We do have nylocks there. We do have a spring washer on top of that, so it's probably fine. That's just my little gripe. Then we've got some they look like 1 watt carbon film grid stoppers, control grid stoppers, and we've got some appear to be 3 watts 470 ohm screen grid resistors there. This amp's not going to be lugged around doing gigs at high volumes and stuff, so they will probably be okay at unless the amp's going to get pushed all the time. If the amp's not getting pushed into overdrive, that often, those will probably be okay as is. Like I said just before, I generally prefer to upgrade them to like 2K, 2.2K. Then we've got our speaker connection here. We've got some good mechanical connections there. Sorry, it's not a great, I haven't got good lighting here. That's probably, what is that, 14 or 16 gauge speaker wire. That's fine. We've got a decent plug there, Switchcraft, if I actually point the camera at it. And for the speaker in here, we've got a Warehouse ET65, which is, I personally think these are great speakers. They work really well with just about anything. And then going on from here, our cabinet here is built really nicely too. It's like reclaimed timber. Don't quote me on what kind of timber it is. It looks like pine. Reclaimed timber, beautiful finger joints. Nice leather handle there. Yeah. One other thing I should mention about this one is just the use of the cloth wire. So, I mean, you know, if you're building a vintage inspired thing, I get it. You want vintage aesthetics where possible. It's very easy to use, especially the solid core stuff. But as it is solid core, it can be prone to cracking. You know, if you flex a joint or a bend more than a handful of times, it can potentially crack just through fatigue. You know, and just the age of the amp, vibrations from the speaker, stuff like that can cause it to crack. The other thing with cloth covered wire is it doesn't really have an appropriate insulation rating. Like the voltage rating of that cloth as insulation is actually only, I think it's, don't quote me on this again, but I think it's only rated for like 300 volts. Another thing that can happen too with this stuff, as it gets older, it can absorb moisture and the wires can become conductive too. I mean, look, you know, you're talking multiple decades, but it's just something that I've found with cloth wire. I personally don't like to use it because I struggle to get the ends not to fray. I actually have an easier time using PTFE with a high strand count. It forms to where you want to put it, and with the right stripping tools and a little bit of practice, it's I find it pretty easy to work with and can get a pretty tidy result with it. All right, so that's my crack at trying to show some of the differences between these things, some of the build quality issues or things you might come across when buying boutique amps. You know, these amps are in a similar price point. Don't quote me on this, but the Morgan, I'm pretty sure, sells for somewhere around $5,000 Australian when it was new. This one is, oh, it's actually closer to, well, it is about 10 years old actually. I thought it was a bit newer, but anyway, so that one's about 10 years old. It sold for about $5,000 new. This one, I couldn't tell you exactly, but maybe somewhere between the $3,000 and $4,000 mark. Priced a bit lower, but you know, it has some, in my opinion, better aspects to it than the Morgan, which cost a bit more. Anyway, that's my crack at it. Let me know if you have any experience with these particular amps, good or bad, or other boutique stuff you've noticed. I guess the point of this stuff is a bit of philosophy, just to keep people's awareness up on gear too. There's always a lot of romance around musical instruments and amplifiers and stuff like that, so it's good to clarify. I personally like it when people clarify some of the potential myths or romance and just talk about these things plainly rather than in marketing jargon and stuff like that. You know, I've read some websites of some builders and the absolute vitriol or made up crap that they write about is just, it's not really helpful to anyone. I mean, it helps maybe younger people or people without any technical knowledge buy stuff, but I personally would prefer to see people talk about things plainly. I know it's hard, especially with electronics and stuff. There's fewer people out there who have deep understanding of it or a working understanding of it. But anyway, yeah, I guess that's it. Yep. Just chuck shit in the comments if you had any thoughts or you think I'm an idiot, whatever. Have a good one.